Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this forum. I think it's on behalf of the Edmonton Interfaith Center. We're here today representing the Bahai faith in Edmonton. My name is David Crew, and I'll be the facilitator / participant in the meeting. And before we move any further, I'd like to have the participants introduce themselves just briefly before we start.
Hi, I'm Nasim Naderi, and I'm very happy to be here.
Hi, I'm BJ Louis Hamadi, and glad to be a participant today.
Hi, my name is Morgan Lane. I'm very excited to be here today.
Hi, my name's Martin Kerr, and I have a funny accent because I'm not from around here, but I am now, and very happy to be part of the Edmonton Interfaith community.
Hi, I'm Tanya Murray, and also really excited to be here today.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody, and I hope we have a very interesting discussion. So before we get into discussion further, I've been asked to just give a very brief overview of the Bahai faith, which in a way is very, very hard to do because once you get started introducing the Bahai faith, you can just go on for hours and hours. So I don't want to do that. So what I will do is I will try to be as brief as possible and focus on the main teachings of the Bahai faith, because that will frame the context of what we're going to say in this discussion. But to start off with, Baha'is are followers of Baha'u'llah, who we believe is the latest messenger or manifestation from God. He was born in Iran in 1817, and that's the teachings of whom we follow. Baha'is are located in over 100,000 localities in virtually every country and territory around the world. And here in Edmonton, there are over 550 Baha'is in the Edmonton Bahai community. In terms of the central teachings of the faith, I'll just briefly mention them. First is that is the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, progressive revelation of religious truth, the development of spiritual qualities, the integration of worship and service, the fundamental equality of the sexes, the harmony between religion and science, the centrality of justice to all human endeavors, the importance of education, and the dynamics of the relationships that are to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. So as we get into this discussion, that will be sort of the background to which our comments will be based. And I'll just end this brief introduction with just a quote from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Bahai faith. O ye children of men, the fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race, and to foster the spirit of love and fellowship amongst men. Whatsoever is raised on this foundation, the changes and chances of the world can never impair its strength, nor will the revelation of countless centuries undermine its structure. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of questions, some of which have been presented or offered by the Edmonton Interfaith Council, and maybe some others that we will address ourselves. So firstly, the first question we want to discuss is, what are the gifts and blessings of your spiritual practice? And I guess we could follow that up with, how do these gifts and blessings translate into how we deal with the current pandemic, and how does it allow us to cope and deal better with them or any of life's tests?
I would have to say that that some of the gifts and blessings of the spiritual practice of the Baha'i faith is aligning yourself with the principles of the Baha'i faith, like David Crew just mentioned. Some of these principles include the oneness of mankind, the oneness of God and religion, and progressive revelation. And by aligning yourself with those truths, so many wondrous doors open, and you're really able to they're gifts in and of themselves. Like, for example, if I recognize the truth that all mankind is one family, then that allows me to consort with any member of any perceived race, and that truly is a blessing and a gift.
Thanks, Morgan.
Yeah, following on from that, it's a very good point, Morgan. I think the principle of the oneness of mankind is a great comfort to me in times of tests, whether they be personal tests or tests for humanity, that I don't feel alone. I feel that I'm part of a global family, that we have a common destiny, and that it's not all on me to figure things out. But at the same time, I can do my part. Yeah, it's very comforting to me to feel that I'm at home and I'm not in a world full of rivals and dangers. And yeah, to see humanity as your family and friends is, I feel it's a very peaceful way to exist, and and I don't just mean outwardly, but inwardly. It's a pretty low stress way to exist. Which has been a great help to me to not be perceiving threat in people who are different from me, but perceiving friendship and wonder and beauty and learning. So that's been a wonderful gift, being raised as a Baha'i child, to have that attitude to people who are different from me.
Yeah, sort of continuing on with that theme, is something that I think is a gift and a blessing, is a feeling of connection that I have with people, but with the world in general and with something bigger than myself. And that sort of lends itself to my purpose in life, that I have a purpose, and that is to be a part of this human family, and to be a part of this world in a constructive way. Yeah, that's something that's important to me, and that gives me direction, purpose.
I think for me, in terms of relation to what's going on in the world right now, it's that the certainty that there is a divine plan for humanity. And so what we're seeing right now is just part of that process. And that's very comforting, given all that we see that's going on in the world. That it's a process that perhaps we have to go through to reach the end destination.
To add to what BJ was saying, I know this year there's been a lot of hopelessness in this world, and there have always been injustices in the world, but I think this year in particular, a lot of them have been brought into a brighter light, and it can bring a lot of hopelessness to our hearts. But I think the biggest gift from the Baha'i faith that I've received is knowing that a better world is inevitable. And that, like Tanya was saying, that our purpose in this world is to strive to create that better world, to every day work towards it, and to know that having these principles of the oneness of mankind, the equality of men and women, the harmony between science and religion, all of these teachings of the Baha'i faith, I know that these are the solutions and what will heal this world. So I'm really grateful for this purpose and to have the ability and the capacity to contribute to a better world.
Yeah, and also just following up on those, I think it's important to note that I think Baha'is feel they don't have, they're not perfect. They don't have each Baha'i is not going to wake up and say, I'm a Baha'i, and I automatically will be able to act and respond and be, in this perfect, lofty manner. It's something that you have to recognize that your humanness, and that you have weaknesses and foibles, but that if you keep your eye on the central teachings of Baha'u'llah, that it allows you to sort of improve and advance every day, not just as an individual, but as a community. So that's, I think, very important too. It's the striving, I think, is an important aspect of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of our spiritual practice as Baha'is is to meditate on the teachings of our faith daily, and how to put them into practice in our lives, and to bring ourselves to account each day in terms of our actions and our thoughts, and how we can improve the next day. But I think the question being about spiritual practice maybe makes people think more about our practices of prayer and meditation and community. And that's something that we have in common with all other faiths. And certainly having the habit and discipline of prayer and meditation is a great gift in times of tests or in good times, whether things are going well or badly, in whatever area of your life, to have that grounding point, that connection to something divine, something eternal, beyond the changes and chances of this world. It gives me a calmer perspective and a reassurance that whatever went on today, there is a grander plan at work. And I have this general feeling, and I don't know if it comes from the faith or not, that everything's going to be okay. And maybe I've just been really lucky in my life, but whatever happens, I find that when I turn to God, and when I turn to Baha'u'llah in prayer and meditation, and when I read the writings, I feel a weight off my shoulders, really, that things I've been worrying about are really small, and that I'm really small. But that actually is a great sense of empowerment to know that it's not all on me, and it's not all about me. I'm part of something grand and wonderful and incredible and eternal. And whatever I give is worthwhile. The idea, which is central to our faith and our way of practice, that work done in the spirit of service is worship. So many of us measure ourselves by the results of our work and our progress in our careers. And to know that God has told me that when I work in a spirit of service, that is the highest calling and the highest achievement. I know that no matter what happens, whatever the results are in this world, if I'm doing it from pure intention to serve humanity, then it's good enough. That's a great comfort to me.
Yeah, on a similar note, like it also provides this goal and the sense of purpose and something to strive and work towards. And I remember Abdul Baha, the son of the founder of our faith. He one of the members of the faith came to him, and he or she was completely distressed about trying to acquire all the virtues that Baha'is are called upon to possess. And Abdul Baha said back, little by little, day by day. And so the Baha'i faith to me is both the goal and what I want to attain, but then it's also the means to attain it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So on that particular subject, Tanya or BJ or Nassim, any thoughts? Further thoughts?
I think that's also a comfort to me, this idea of like little by little, day by day. And even the idea that there's a quote in the faith where it says there's no room for guilt. So it's not even about sort of comparing yourself to trying to be perfect or to what everyone else is doing, but it's about finding in your heart what you to contribute. And sort of everyone's on their own path. Everyone has their talents to give. And that I think is really, really exciting as well, that you can sort of develop yourself and do that in service to people, contribute that to the world. Like we're all special and we all have stuff to give.
Yeah, I think for just one last comment on that for me is I've been a Bahai since 1981, I think 1981, and this slowly, day by day is a wonderful thing, and I've been lucky enough to live in various places, and definitely now it's easy for me to just wherever I'm at, whoever I see from whatever culture they are, for the most part I see people just as human beings. So the next discussion topic: what is the role of the sacred or divine spirit in your daily life?
I mean, I think Martin touched upon it a little earlier in terms of the fact that, we're given the guidance to pray daily and to meditate and to reflect on our actions and to read on the writings. And I feel like it helps to guide our decisions and our actions, as well as provide a means for us to a form of protection, which I find is nice. We're not supposed to be perfect, that we pray on what we do, we reflect, and then we start again the next day. So I think for me that is a big part. We're given that framework to guide us.
I think it also provides us with a good grounding, and to tie in especially with what's happening with COVID. The daily practices prescribed to us as Baha'is, they really help ground us in something that is well above all of us, and really gives us a higher calling, and it's a weird balance between being grounded and then also uplifted, and yeah.
For me, the role of the divine in my life as a Baha'i is very tangible, and I feel very, very fortunate to be a Baha'i for many reasons, but partly because the Baha'i faith is so recent historically. We have the gift of having so many prayers and writings in the original words of our founder, which we believe to be fully divine. So to Baha'is, Baha'u'llah is the same spirit that existed in Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and Muhammad and Zoroaster and the founders of the great religions. That same divine spirit reflected in human form. And because those faiths began so many hundreds and thousands of years ago, there isn't another faith that has such a wealth of direct writings and sayings of the Prophet. So we're incredibly lucky to be able to open a book every morning and read the words of Baha'u'llah. When I want to pray, I don't have to come up with my own prayer. I'm certainly free to do that, but for me, it's another weight off my mind, and incredibly enlightening to be able to open my prayer book and read the words of Baha'u'llah. And he's told me what to pray for, and he's given me so many choices, so many ways into tapping into that divine spirit, so many different spiritual vitamins and nourishments to start my day and end my day, and to keep me going through the tough parts of the day, or to celebrate the best parts of the day, not only by myself, but with my family and my community. Obviously a bit less with the community this year, which has been tough, but to me, that's a real blessing and a real presence of the divine, to have the actual words of Baha'u'llah, to us, the words of God, in our pocket or on a bedside table, available to us all the time.
I think keeping along on this same tangent, like the idea of prayer and how important and central it is to, I think, all of our lives, and even extending that to like where Abdul Baha said that man must live in a state of prayer. And so like really bringing that sort of throughout your whole day, and that it's sort of like setting your compass, and it's a guide to everything you do throughout the day and calling you to your higher purpose. Sort of at the back of your mind is always, well, how can I rise to my true nature? How can I be more kind? How can I be more just, more forgiving, more loving? And sort of aligning your actions with these forces of unity and of love and of truth that exist in the world. I think about that a lot.
What you said, Tanya, reminded me of that quotation from the Bahai writings that say, "Strive that your actions day by day may be beautiful prayers." Just knowing that our actions can be a way to pray is just so beautiful. It's not limited to just me in the privacy of my chamber saying my prayers, communicating with God, but my actions and my deeds, when I can translate those into a prayer, that it makes everything I do so much more meaningful.
One thing in that last quote you read there, or said, Nassim, was the word strive. So that's very important. It doesn't say you will automatically become, the pillar of virtue and spirituality overnight. It's the striving that is very important. And those things can manifest themselves from the smallest, seemingly insignificant things we do through the day or in life to the larger ones. So, the way you look at someone who cuts you off in traffic or does something rude to you on the street or in a store, or little things like that to life. How can I react to that? Will I react by getting mad or feeling upset, or will I just try to overcome that or move on or say, I do that same thing too sometimes. So, and some days you're better at it than others, but at least if you have that lofty goal in mind and you strive, I think it's very, very, very important.
I think another part of the day-to-day role that spirituality plays in my life is community. Baha'is believe very strongly in unity and the community life and community spirituality and collective spirituality. And so in my day-to-day life, I always look forward to being a part of the community, doing community service projects, and that does play a huge, very significant role in my life. And I definitely feel like I'm not alone. I feel like the parts are greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so that's a huge part of the day to day for me, is the collective spirituality.
Another thing that is perhaps unusual about the Baha'i faith, in terms of the role of the divine in our lives, is that as well as the words of Baha'u'llah, our prophet founder, we also have the example of his son, Abdul Baha, who was known as the Master. And, it's difficult to imagine, when you're struggling with a situation or looking for the right thing to do, to imagine what would Baha'u'llah do or what would Jesus do, because we are not of that station. We are not connected to the divine in the same way. We're not here to teach the world the will of God. We're here to put it into practice and to follow and to discover the will of God. And so we're very fortunate to have this perfect exemplar of Abdul Baha, who lived a life of perfect service. And of course, we can't ever be as perfect as him, but we can strive towards it, because he was human like us, and in that station of servitude and humbleness that we can strive for. So that's a wonderful part of my life, I think, is that I can read the stories of the life of Abdul Baha. And I think every Baha'i knows something about Abdul Baha and carries him and his example in their heart. And it's a bit easier to say, well, what would Abdul Baha do in this situation? And invariably, it's something incredibly loving and incredibly patient and brave. And so it inspires me and inspires us to an incredible standard that lifts me up beyond what I think I'm capable of some days. To have that example of Abdul Baha and all those stories of his life.
Thanks for those responses. Now, the next question here is, if your family incorporates more than one faith in their family circle, please share a success story from your experience.
So for me, I became a Bahai in my 20s. So I guess my first nuclear family doesn't share the same faith. And of course, there's definitely was some challenges to navigate through that. Probably particularly, I think I saw it the most in when I was seeking consent to get married. So as a Bahai, one of the spiritual laws is that we must seek consent from both sides of the families in order to get married. And really that's a protection. And we see that it puts the principle of unity right at the forefront of the union of two. It's not just the union of two individuals, but the union of two families. And so at the time, I saw that as being more of a barrier, I guess, than a protection. But we saw through that, I think, that the coming of the two families, they really had to understand and learn about each other and get through some of the things that they felt were differences. But in fact, as they worked through it, really saw that they had a lot of more commonalities than differences. I think I was the first to marry outside of my own culture, and that probably was the biggest barrier for my parents. But, like 17 years later, I don't think they really see, they see why, and I think when you have children too, that they see the union of two different cultures and what comes from that.
So I live with my grandparents and my mom and my brother, and my mom and I are the only Baha'is in our family. The rest of our family is Protestant Christian. But it's honestly it's such a boon, because we get to learn so much about the Christian faith and reaffirm our faith in what the Bible teaches us, as well as have learn what we do from the Baha'i faith. And our grandparents and my mom and I, we have study circles and study prayers and verses from both the Baha'i faith and Christianity, and we see the similarities rather than the differences in the teachings and the virtues and the values and the principles. There's so much in common, and there's so much that we can use to work together on our quest for human unity.
Yeah, I know one of the writings of Baha'u'llah says, "Consort ye with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship." And if you make that your watchword as you deal with members of different religions, either in your family, like my immediate family are Baha'is, but a lot of aunts and uncles and whatnot, all of them are not Baha'is. I'm the only Baha'i in my family. And I know when I was first a Baha'i, I come from Cape Breton Island, and down in Cape Breton Island, being back when I was growing up anyway, anything outside the norm was looked upon with great suspicion, and as if you were really the odd person, and you got to stay away from him. And but over time, you can deal with those thoughts that people might have, and look upon it in the completely opposite mode. And I find that is very, very uplifting for me. So here we go. This is the advice corner now. So here we go. So what advice would you share with others who are on a spiritual journey? That is a very, very open-ended question.
When I think of that question, the first thing that comes to mind is this beautiful writing from the Bahai Faith that says, the more we search for ourselves, the less likely we are to find ourselves. And the more we search for God and serve our fellow men, the more profoundly will we become acquainted with ourselves and the more inwardly assured. This is one of the great spiritual laws of life. And I think that's so beautiful and so true that you can spend hours meditating by ourselves and learning about spiritual truths, but if we don't put them into action, then we're not really learning about them. For example, if I'm trying to learn more about patience, I can meditate and stay in isolation, but I really won't be tested by my patience until I put it into practice with others. And I think that's how we know ourselves better, because we are all God's creation, and we all possess his attributes of love, of kindness, of patience. And that's when we develop those things, that's when we really discover who we are.
In the Baha'i Faith, our founder, he says, O Son of Spirit, my first counsel is this: possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. And if I had to share a piece of advice to someone who's starting out on a spiritual journey or is anywhere along their spiritual journey, to come back to the basic essentials of who they are and their inherent nobility, and wash away and detach themselves from all things that they know in their heart will lead them down the wrong path or will taint them. And I think that purity and that kindness and showing kindness to and love to your fellow man is the of the utmost importance. And through doing so, you will become a sovereignty and you will attain your spiritual goals.
I think anybody who's listening to this conversation is probably doing so because they are interested in learning from other faiths and other traditions, and interested in learning something from the Baha'i Faith. And it's a great truth that we can learn something from everyone. And if you want to learn something from the Baha'i teachings, for me, my favorite of the Baha'i writings on the concept of a spiritual journey is a book called The Seven Valleys, which is a very mystical work, and it draws on ancient Sufi poetry and traditional stories and incredible imagery. And for me, as I was first kind of delving into the Baha'i writings as a teenager, that was my favorite book and very inspiring to me. And I carried it with me on my travels around the world. And I think there's something in there for everybody who's on a spiritual journey. Of course, there are many, many other books, but that would be my advice if you're on a spiritual quest, would be to let yourself dive into some of the Baha'i writings, because they're incredibly rich and beautiful. And The Seven Valleys is one of my favorites. There's also The Hidden Words that Morgan mentioned, and many other wonderful books that could inspire you and potentially help you. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, and I hope that we can learn something from you as well.
BJ, I think you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, I think when the first thing that comes to my mind about that question is what sort of advice is that everybody's path is different, and someone else's will look different than mine. Mine will look different than someone else's, and it doesn't make it any less or better. And I think it's hard because we often look, especially when we're seeking some sort of perhaps interested or seeking faith, we come into a community and we see the exemplars, I think, is what you often come across first in a community, and that we would need to attain that in order to achieve, I guess, to achieve or become like, for example, a Bahai. But that's not necessarily the way it is. I think everyone's path will look different, and to know that and to be okay with that.
The one thing I sort of wanted to add to this is the first thing that came to mind is I feel like we're all on a spiritual path, maybe with different senses of purpose and at different stages on that path, but we're all on it. And then I don't think it ever ends. Like, it's not about arriving somewhere, that it's a continuous journey. So I think don't stop seeking. Like, even if you find a faith community that resonates with you, that sort of spiritual journey doesn't end. We never stop seeking. We're always seekers after truth.
So I think I'll ask the same question in two different ways. So the first way is, where do you find joy and adventure within your spiritual self? Or another way to ask that maybe is, does being spiritual give you an opportunity to be joyful, adventurous, and enjoy all aspects of life?
This question really resonates with me, actually, because to me, that's what spirituality means to me. And it very much does make me feel joyful and adventurous and able to enjoy all aspects of life. And when I feel connected to my spirit, when I've prayed deeply and meditated profoundly, then the beauty of the world is so tangible to me. It's like really a feeling of oneness, of being connected on a cellular level to the birds singing on the branch outside the window and the fragrance on the breeze. And these kinds of things become so sensuous and so wonderful. And meeting new people becomes an incredible adventure to find the divine spark in another human face and voice. Those are the things that make me know that I'm on the right path, because when I'm connected to that spirit, everything seems wonderful. And that relates back to the book I was talking about. One of the valleys that the spiritual quester goes through is the valley of wonderment. And I feel like a few times I've stepped into the valley of wonderment, and that's what keeps me going back. So to me, growing up as a Bahai child, my parents raised me as a Bahai, and they were first generation Baha'is. To have that knowledge in my heart that the whole world is my home and that all humanity are my family made the world seem like an incredible adventure and an incredible sea of possibilities rather than something to be afraid of. And I'm so grateful to have been raised with that consciousness. And I'm very, very privileged to have grown up in a time and place where I was safe enough to feel that way. But I think the teachings of the Baha'i faith were really instrumental in giving me that attitude of possibility. And it kind of reminds me of the movie Soul, which just came out, which hinges on the spark of life.
Everybody's talking about this movie.
If you haven't seen it yet, you should see it. But I think a lot of people have just seen it. And the crux of the movie really is when he realizes that the wonder of creation is what brings his soul to life. Being aware and grateful and in the moment appreciating the beauty of the leaf falling from the tree and the sunlight on the sidewalk and the music in the air. When you're connected to your soul, these things bring you to life, and you're free from worries, I think, because you're aware of your divine purpose and your divine origin and your divine destination. And so the things along the way, we can totally immerse ourselves in the wonder of them rather than worrying about our fears.
So maybe another way to explore this particular question is, would focusing on the spiritual self preclude you from partaking of certain joys in the world?
I think that joy is also considered to be a little bit of a virtue as well. Being able to be deep in your spirit and whenever worries or anxieties or stress or anything comes your way, that a life in the spirit gives you immense joy, and you're able to kind of combat the darkness or reignite the flame that will allow you to carry on and do the best that you can day by day. For me, joy, this virtue of joy is something that is so profound.
Picking up on what Martin said originally about this question is, on my good days, some days I'm not so, I'm not in the zone, as they say, but when I'm some days when you're just, everything, the sun and the moon is aligned up and you're feeling really good, and for whatever reason that is, and I go for a walk, I can just, to my limited ability, I can see all of nature and all of humanity just being in one common collective state of unity, especially nature. And that sounds pretty, doesn't last forever for me, but it definitely is there. And it's very, very uplifting for me.
I think when I first read this question, I had a hard time trying to come up with a response. But where I do find, I think, that joy is similar to what others already mentioned too, is in nature. When you're outside, you see how big the world is and what God has created. But I think the flip side of that is I find for myself when I'm not, I don't feel the joy, and is when I'm focusing on things that are not of a spiritual nature. So the reverse, when I get caught up in, like the daily stresses of life, or the minute things that seem insignificant at the time, but are not, they don't contribute to our greater purpose, then I feel the opposite. So I have to bring myself back. When I focus on something, more of a spiritual nature, then I feel like it's also a bit of a freedom. Like you feel that upliftment, you feel that kind of burden lifted from you.
I like the way you asked the question, David, because with any religious faith, there's usually a code of laws to follow. And Baha'u'llah says in his book of laws, the most holy book, "Think not that we have revealed unto you a mere code of laws. Nay, rather we have unsealed the choice wine." And this metaphor of wine is used quite a lot in the Baha'i writings, the wine of astonishment, as well as another phrase. And that's interesting because the Baha'is are forbidden from consuming alcohol. And to many in the West, that seems like a really restrictive law, because alcohol is such a part of our social life and our personal life and our self-medication to get through our problems and what we look forward to. So that can be a sticking point for a lot of people who are investigating the Baha'i faith. Or I have friends who can't believe that I don't drink, and they just don't understand how it's possible for a human to enjoy their life without alcohol. And to me, it's been a wonderful liberation to grow up in a household where alcohol wasn't part of our lives, that I didn't have to worry about one of my parents flying off the handle or spending our money on an addiction. It's really about freedom from addiction, because to really appreciate the beauty and wonder of life, we need our full awareness. And so anything that robs us of that awareness is not good for us. And I believe that's the spirit of the teachings when it comes to the restrictions around alcohol and mind-altering drugs. So to me, that's been a great gift to grow up knowing that I have free access to that sense of wonder and those planes of ecstasy through prayer and meditation and service and things like music and art and nature, and not through chemical substances. Though, of course, sometimes they're very useful in the medical field. And, because we believe in the unity of science and religion, if we're prescribed a substance by our doctor for our health, then we can take it. So there's no conflict there. But I feel really lucky that while most of my peers growing up in high school and even after were dealing with addictions issues, that I hadn't had that burden. And that's not to say that Baha'is don't struggle with addictions too, because we do. But it's very clear to us from the teachings that that substances are not the way to true enlightenment, and that actually they can lead us off course. And so I think that's pretty cool. And it is really about joy and freedom, and not about restriction. I don't feel restricted at all. To me, we have this concept of detachment in the Baha'i faith, of not being attached to worldly things. And I had this kind of vision, I don't remember when it first came to me, but that I'm basically an astronaut floating in space. And if I'm detached from all of the celestial bodies that are all orbiting and spinning around me in their own paths, then I'm free to explore every single one of them, and to go down onto each planet and experience its wonders, and to fly back and appreciate their beauty from afar. But if I'm attached to any of them, then I'm constantly being dragged around and I have no freedom. And if I'm attached to many of them, I'm being torn apart. So that's been a really useful metaphor for me in understanding this concept of detachment. And to be truly spiritually free is to not give over my heart to any of these things that can rule my life or drag me in a certain path. Okay, I'm going to move to another question now in the context of the Baha'i community and every other faith community. There is the individual, there is the community itself, and there are the institutions of that particular faith group. This is a very important subject, how those relate to one another. I was wondering if you had any thoughts to share on this particular subject.
A good analogy that I've had to explain to me about the way that the individuals, the collective, and then the community, and then the institutions all interact with one another is like the human body. Individuals could be like individual cells, and the community could be like organs and more complex structures, and then eventually it goes all the way up to institutions, which has higher executive functioning, like the brain, and it's you need at each level you need each level in order to have the end greater than the sum of its part, and it greatly amplifies it exponentially the individual spiritual life, the collective spiritual life, and then the institutions. And it's also it's important to note that the once you get up to the level of institution, it actually comes back down to the individual, and how if all the individual's spiritual life is out of balance or isn't grounded and deep in their faith, then ultimately all the way up to the institutions suffer. And I think that's some of the unrest that we're seeing in the world today, is that people are starting to realize that the institutions have had some corruption, and now we're trying to rejuvenate ourselves with individual spiritual faith and advocating for individual rights.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, because although like spirituality is, I think, a very individual thing that everyone's sort of on their own path, but there's also this idea of the collective and of communities and of like the entire human family. We've mentioned several times about how important unity is in the Baha'i faith, and that it's really hard to sort of grow spiritually in isolation. And then none of us are really in isolation, that we're all part of a community. We're all part of a family. We're all part of the world. And so I think like a major challenge in sort of belonging to any faith community is like how to bring a lot of these principles into action and into practice within the community. Like it's not just about any one person on their own, but now, okay, how do we exemplify these principles together with everyone in all of their diversity and all of their backgrounds? And it can be a big challenge, but I think there's also in that there's a lot of bounty, a lot of blessings, a lot of growth that can be had. And I know for me as a Baha'i, that's a really important part of being a Baha'i is the community. learning how to develop these true bonds of friendship, learning what does unity actually mean in practice. It's not just a frivolous word that we throw around. It's not airy-fairy, like everyone holding hands and singing together, but like, how do we practically bring that into existence?
I think an example that I think of is prayer. So, we are encouraged to pray every day, and that's the connection that I have with my Creator. But we're also encouraged, and we receive guidance from the institution, that one of the things Bahai is encouraged to do is to share devotions with others as well. We have a devotional gathering where you can pray together, pray for each other, pray for your community. So yeah, that's what comes to mind when I think of how those kind of things can connect together.
For me, one of the unique features and one of the blessings and the challenges of being a Bahai is that it's very much a do-it-yourself faith. Not that we make it up as we go along. There's a lot of divine guidance, but we're all, individual Baha'is and members of the community. And at any time, any adult Baha'i can be called to serve on one of our institutions. There's no process of, going to seminary and becoming a figure of authority in the Baha'i faith. We elect our spiritual assemblies annually to guide our community on a consultative basis. And it's a position of service that any of us can be called to and feel massively inadequate for. But having, served on some of those institutions and committees and been a rank and file member of the community, it's really interesting, I think, that we all have those roles to play, and that we have to figure things out. Because I think for many people, I meet a lot of people from different faiths. I perform as a singer and musician in places of worship of many different faiths, and I often see people come and go from these places looking for a community that fits their needs and fits their beliefs. And the Baha'i faith isn't really like that. Although that may be your experience, if you come to the Baha'i faith and think, wow, these are my people, or these teachings really resonate with me. It's about building something together. It's not that it's all there provided for us to enjoy, that we're actually on the ground, digging the trenches and putting the bricks in place of a world that works for everybody, in a community that protects the vulnerable and brings the best out of each other. And of course, this year has been uniquely challenging in that regard, trying to have a community at all. But it's an incredible adventure to be part of building the Baha'i community and putting these teachings into practice and finding the ways that we can do that uniquely in our community. Because, as David mentioned, there are Baha'is in every locality on earth, pretty much. And each one has its unique features and its unique needs. So we get to be the ones that figure out how to do this together. And it takes a lot of patience because for me, when I was first really getting into the Baha'i faith as a teenager, other Baha'is were the best part about it for me. I was so inspired by my community and these cool older youth and incredibly loving and inspiring adults with this sense of service to humanity and incredible talents. And I wanted to be around them. I wanted to be like them. But then as you grow older and you get to know people better, there's always a process of learning things that are not perfect and maybe falling out of love with the community. And sometimes that can be a real barrier for people in their spiritual journey when they have a real disappointment with somebody or feeling betrayed or let down by the community or somebody in it. Thankfully, that's not really happened to me, but I've seen it happen to a lot of people. And we have to be so patient with each other and not think that the community is the embodiment of the faith. Of course, we would hope to see some evidence of goodness and progress in the people that are trying to live by these teachings, but we have to have our own relationship. And for me, it always comes back to that individual communion with God every day through our prayer and meditation and our attitude of service. Because whatever happens in the community, however hard it gets, you can always restore your faith through that individual connection. And to me, the Baha'i community is not about what we can get from it, although I got a lot from it as a young Baha'i. I now find myself as an adult I'm in the position of needing to give something back, and sometimes that's hard. So forgive me if I'm rambling a bit, but just I feel a sense of responsibility as an adult Baha'i to be contributing to the community, and I'm very conscious of the fact that the community is what we make it, and that it's not this place that we can just go and get what we need and then go off on our lives again.
I really like what you mentioned, Martin, about it's almost like a cycle of service, and how the individual gives to the community and gives to the institutions, and then the institution gives back spiritual guidance to the individual and to the community. And so it has a really deep significance when you're able to work like a unit, as a unit like that, and really progress through service through service from the individual to the institutions, and from the institution to the individual towards on the pathway towards God. And I think that it really bolsters the level and degree to which you can progress spiritually.
As you get involved in a community, on the one hand, there's the expectation that the community or everything about it will be, like fluffy little clouds and, little lambs, and everything will be just absolutely wonderful. But in a real diverse community, such as the Baha'i community, that is simply not the case. There is, even from the smallest thing. So even if you're having a conversation, for instance, and the way I was brought up, once I finish saying what I've said, there's a certain period of time, a little gap, that is acceptable to me before the next person can give their response. And then some cultures, it's very acceptable to talk right over the top of one another, not even before they're finished. In other cultures, it's acceptable and understood that you should wait patiently for maybe 5 to 10 seconds before you want to contribute something else. And if you're in a community that you have the whole gamut of this, of course that's going to be a learning experience, and that's just one small thing. So it is a test and an opportunity for everybody to grow and to learn. So it's not going to be just you snap your fingers and everything is wonderful. You have to strive and try. So in closing, I would really like to thank all of you, Nassim, BJ, Morgan, Martin, and Tanya, for contributing and taking part and adding all your wonderful, insightful comments. And anyone who is viewing this particular discussion forum, thank you very much for listening, and just warm and loving regards to you all. So thank you.